Elephants are the most intelligent. They understand intelligent. The most intelligent seamen. As singles are bigger and more intelligent, corpses squirrels have horses are more intelligent than humans. Never heard of that. African elephants and Asian elephants. Asian elephants have smaller ears, and they're not as attractive. If you want the ivory sawed off, drink one of the elephant sawed off, kill the fucking elephant. Somebody Google that. That's not peace. They kill elephants for the ivory. It's illegal now. It's been for years. Somebody said, I say tranquilizer and saw ivory off and let them wake up, and somebody said that leaves them defenseless. It may not. Maybe another male elephant sees them. I think both. So it used to be the alpha males, the ones that have birds. I just makes either. If a alpha male saw a male elephant without tusks, it probably wouldn't confront it. I've been retaining water because I haven't been taking my diuretic. Or I took my diuretic. So I'll feel better soon. in the dark.
Guest was a huge and vital and important part of our family here at MSNBC, doing something that was easy for him but hard for the rest of us, offering his staple, direct, no-nonsense interviews and always asking all of his guests the hard questions. In his new memoir, This Country, My Life in Politics and History, Chris Matthews charts his American story through his life and career, talking deeply with abiding faith about where we've been and where he hopes we'll go. Given the ongoing conversation on this program and over the last 2 hours about the insurrection at our nation's capital, I want to read this from Chris's new book. Quote, "No one could have truly foreseen how badly the presidency of Donald Trump would end. After losing the 2020 election, Trump tried every legal and PR trick he could to overturn those results. Well past the ratification of the vote in the Electoral College on December 14th, he continued to insist to his 74.2 million voters that he had won in a landslide. In those last months of 2020, I thought that was the worst thing he could do as president. What I watched in January 2021 told me I had been wrong. The only thing worse would have been if he'd gotten himself reelected. 4 more years of this guy might have been a national horror impossible to fully obliterate. Joining us now is my friend, the longtime host of MSNBC's Hardball and the author of This Country. Hi there, Chris Matthews.
Oh, it's great to be on your very popular show. You are really doing the job here at MS. Really, you know you are. 2 hours? Come on. That is nuts. It is.
I think you warned me about the 2-hour thing, and I should have listened to you.
Good for you. Just to follow up on this, the opening, I love the opening because Trump, I didn't start off disliking the guy. There was no visceral problem between me and him. I covered him for years when he was sort of clowning around, talking about running for president. But he's up there with Benedict Arnold right now. He's a traitor to our beliefs. The great thing about our country is the intertwining of elections and freedom. They go together. You don't have freedom without elections. You don't have elections without freedom. And he's cut right through that by saying the election didn't happen, almost like in a developing country. He lost an election, so he said it was rigged. Come on. Hillary Clinton, Al Gore, John McCain, John Kerry, everybody, Mitt Romney, they know how to lose. It takes guts and patriotism to stand before your voters and say, I did my best, I lost. This other person is president of the United States. Let's be loyal to this other person. They all have done it going back to the first person that lost, I guess John Adams. And this guy can't do it. He's not man enough to walk before his people and say, I blew it in my mishandling of Corona all the way, and I got an opponent who's a pretty popular guy, Joe Biden. He beat me. I'm going to live with it because that's the way the American people want their country run, where people walk away from power the way that George Washington walked away from power. He didn't choose to be a dictator. He could have been a dictator. He went right back to Virginia and said, I believe in America, and that means going home when your job is through.
I worked on John McCain's concession speech to President Obama, and I know that John McCain and Mark Salter, who wrote that exquisite speech for him, John McCain felt like it was one of the most important speeches of his career. But you just said something that I think, as you always do, gets right to the crux of it. The concession speech is about your patriotism. It is about bestowing legitimacy on the rightful victor. Do you have the conclusion that Trump was never patriotic at all?
I think it was a work in progress. He got worse as he went on. He certainly did. He must have noticed that he lost the first race, or he lost the first race by 4 million, the second one by 7 million. These were not close calls. These were not squeakers. And for him to lie and say that he won is absurd. And for people to follow him, you got to wonder, what do they think of democracy? What do they think of their vote? Is their vote owned by Trump, or do they have the vote? What are they thinking when they say Trump got reelected, knowing he did not? Knowing he did not. The states that he won in 16 by squeakers, he lost by squeakers. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those states, and then of course Arizona, he lost. It's painfully obvious he lost. And then on the 5th, he said, I didn't. And there's a progression of horror that led to. He said, I know how bad he was. First of all, he says he won, which he did. And then we had January 6th, which he encouraged to happen. And then 2/3 of the Republican Party, up to 70% actually, said Trump's right, he won. And then we had the general, Michael Flynn, who I didn't think was this bad when I first met him, say we should, that's a great word, we should have a military coup. This is a natural progression. It's a prologue to something worse. And if he'd gotten reelected, that would have been that something worse. Well, thank God he has no constitutional power left at all. He can't do anything except talk. The sad thing about this country is I care about this country, that a third of it believes this trap, this crap, this lie about our history. And it's really the first time in our history. This happens all the time in countries in Africa and other parts of the world that are new to democracy, where the winner arrests everybody and the loser claims it was a rigged election. But we know our elections are honest in this country. They really are honest, and they're decided by 70,000 votes, 50,000 votes. These aren't squeakers that you can explain by somebody cheating somewhere here or there. We know who won. That's Trump. That's the ideological and psychological question. Is he just a liar, or is he nuts? You tell me. Maybe he's a mix. But we know he lost.
What do you think? What do you think? Liar or nuts?
I think he's a goner. The guy doesn't pay his bills. You know, for years we heard he never paid his bills. He has a bill to this country. A politician's dead. And that's the debt of saying you lose when you lose. That's the deal. You shouldn't run for office if you can't walk up to the country and the state or the county or whatever, the mayor of a city. You should run for office if you can't accept defeat, because it's part of the game. It is a game in that sense, because every time there's an election, somebody loses. Maybe a number of people in a primary lose, and you got to walk before your people and tell them, I lost. I wish I won. We all wish I'd won, but this other person is now the candidate of our party, or in a general election, they're the office holder to come. You know, I was thinking that I'm a romantic about this politics. I think about Adlai Stevenson, who said, I'm too old to cry, but it hurts too much to laugh. I think about Hillary Clinton, shocked by what happened in 2016, going down to the Pennsylvania Hotel across from Penn Station, in that hotel, standing in front of her people and saying the right thing. The Trump's president of the United States. Or Richard Nixon losing a squeaker. It was so close. It was so close. It was painful. Any movie he made, he might have won. And there he went and met with Jack Kennedy down in Key Biscayne. They had a couple of Cokes together, and he certified the victory for Jack Kennedy. And he didn't want to do it. He had his suspicions about what had happened in Chicago with Mayor Daley, and what happened in Texas with Lyndon Johnson in charge. And no two-party system, as you remember, Nicole, back then. You don't remember, but there was no Republican Party in Texas in 60. And so nobody watched, the poll watchers, who knows how many ballots LBJ got his hands on, or Dick Daley was able to when he called up Kennedy and said, with the help of a few good friends. We know what that meant. You know, you're going to carry Illinois. And Nixon still, because he didn't want to ruin our country and disable us during the Cold War. He knew we needed to be united. Where's that from Trump? A sense of nationalism, a sense of, he says America first. It wasn't America first when he said, I won the election. It was Trump first. That should be his battle flag. Trump first. Because it's certainly not America first.
Is abusing some of the most serious powers of search, of Fourth Amendment constitution.
Gone horribly wrong. 2 people killed, all over a dirt bike. The shootout happening in Athens on Monday in a neighborhood just off of Atlanta Highway. CBS 46's Farmel Lyon. She joins us live in Athens tonight with the latest. Farmel, good evening.
Good evening, Sean. Police say the Facebook Marketplace swap was not a drive-by, but rather an exchange that took a deadly turn. This tragic event, a grim reminder to take precautions when buying anything from anyone online.
My grandkids say, Grandma, get back. They shoot down there.
A Facebook Marketplace swap takes a turn, and shots go flying.
It was a pow, 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 yes. 6 times.
According to police, 21-year-old Casey Parton and his 24-year-old brother, Tyler, came to an Athens Stonehenge subdivision to purchase a dirt bike advertised on Facebook Marketplace from 16-year-old Ashawn Adams. But something went wrong and shots were fired. A neighbor says the exchange of gunfire was frightening.
She just said, Grandmother, please, I'm crying. It's dead bodies are laying around here.
16-year-old seller Ashawn Adams was pronounced dead at the scene. Buyer Casey Parton taken to the hospital, dying 2 days later as a result of his injuries.
You just don't know what to do now. It's just certain things you really need to buy from the people off the street, because you don't know what it is.
Athens Clark County Police Department reminding the community to put safety first when meeting strangers. They advise providing a swap spot parking lot indicated by green parking spaces that has 24-hour video surveillance, encouraging the community to be in a well-lit public area, telling friends or family about your meeting, and checking users' profile before going. All of it to keep you and your neighbors safe.
All of us need to get together and do better and try to get something done about all of this. I think we should.
CBS 46 News.
It was tiny when things were good in Shady's Egg.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, good morning to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. It is Friday, June 11th, and we do begin with breaking news: abuse of power. That's what we're talking about. New stunning allegations of abuse of power. New questions about just how far Donald Trump, William Barr, Jeff Sessions pushed the Justice Department to go to look into perceived enemies, digging into the personal communications of members of Congress and even their families. Here are the specifics. Prosecutors in the Trump Justice Department subpoenaed Apple for the communications data of at least 2 House Intelligence Committee Democrats, Chairman Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, along with their staff and family members, including a child. To put that in plain English, they went after certain iPhone records of key Democrats involved in the Russia investigations. The New York Times first reported the story that prosecutors were trying to find the sources behind media reports about contacts between Trump associates in Russia. Times goes on to say that even after investigators thought they hit a dead end and discussed closing the inquiry, Bill Barr directed them to keep digging.
Chairman Adam Schiff, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, they're calling for an investigation into what Pelosi says is the, quote, weaponization of the DOJ by the Trump White House. News of these subpoenas are just the latest evidence of Trump's heavy-handed tactics when it comes to leak investigations, but it's also the most alarming, revealing the unprecedented lengths that the Trump administration went to as it targeted its political enemies. And this comes after we learned that they also secretly obtained records from journalists. This also includes, of course, our very own CNN's Barbara Starr, as well as reporters from the Washington Post and other news organizations. Let's get the latest now from CNN's Laura Jarrett. You know, Laura, I know that sometimes these things can blend together. There are a lot of red flags that have come out of the Trump administration. It's important to note this is different. This is a new level.
That's right, Brianna. It turns out reporters weren't the only ones targeted by Trump's Justice Department and didn't know it. The lengths that the Justice Department went to help the former president in his quest to get to the bottom of stories he didn't like, now far more serious than previously known. Democratic lawmakers, their staff, and their families are the latest known targets of a Trump Justice Department hunt for leakers. New reporting overnight reveals that as the former president fumed over stories detailing contacts between Trump associates in Russia, behind the scenes, the DOJ subpoenaed Apple for data to hunt down the sources for those stories. The records sought in 2018 from more than 100 accounts include those of now House Intel Chairman Adam Schiff, a source familiar with the matter confirmed to CNN.
Well, I can't go into who received these subpoenas or whose records were sought. I can't say that it was extraordinarily broad. People having nothing to do with the intelligence matters that are at least being reported on. It just shows what a broad fishing expedition it was, and so many norms were broken in connection with this.
As first reported by the New York Times, the probe started under then-embattled Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Apple provided metadata and account information, a person familiar with the inquiry said, but the evidence showed no proof of leaks from the committee at the time.
But I do think the department needs to do a lot of self-examination, get to the bottom of how it was misused and abused, and take corrective action.
A trail that had gone cold under Sessions then changed. Bill Barr became Attorney General and revived the investigation with a prosecutor from New Jersey. Barr ordered him to work on the investigation with Schiff and others. 3 people familiar with the case told the Times. DOJ managed to get a court to issue a gag order on Apple that was renewed 3 times before it expired last month, allowing the company to notify some committee members their records had been shared, a source told CNN. Congressman Eric Swalwell says he received that notice and confirmed reporting that a minor child was also a target.
I believe they were targeted punitively, not for any reason in law, but because Donald Trump identified Chairman Schiff and members of the committee as an enemy of his.
Schiff says the Justice Department informed him the investigation was closed in May, but added in a statement, quote, "I believe more answers are needed, which is why I believe the Inspector General should investigate this and other cases that suggest the weaponization of law enforcement by a corrupt president." House Speaker Nancy Pelosi echoed that call, saying, "These actions appear to be yet another egregious assault on our democracy waged by the former president. Transparency is essential."
The Justice Department and Bill Barr declined to comment on all this new reporting. So did a representative for Apple. But the real question this morning, with a new administration in place, is how does Attorney General Merrick Garland give the public confidence that the department will no longer be used for political ends? Brianna?
All right, Laura Jarrett, thank you so much for that report.
All right, joining us now, CNN political analyst and New York Times Washington correspondent Maggie Haberman and former FBI Deputy Assistant Director Peter Strzok. Thank you both so much for joining us. Look, Peter, I want to start with you. There are and have been corruption investigations into members of Congress where you look into certain things to figure out if they did something wrong, but I can't think of anything quite like this. What Adam Schiff describes as a fishing expedition, this broad-based search for the personal communications records of members of Congress and their families. Any precedent here? What do you make of it?
Well, I'd say, look, there certainly is a reason to have these investigations open. There were a real problem with leaks in 2016 and 17, and the government has an obligation to maintain classified information and look at those people who are illegally disclosing it. Having said that, I worked media leak investigations for 15 years. I supervised all of the FBI's media leak investigations. And I can't remember an instance like this of such a broad scope. We have now 8 or more reporters whose records were obtained. We have multiple members of Congress. And in my experience, Congress was always treated extraordinarily deferentially due to free speech and debate protections. And to see multiple members, and not only that, family members and minors, it's unprecedented in my experience.
Maggie, what do you think about this? I do think as we look at some of the red flags, as I said before, that come out of the Trump administration, sometimes these things blend together. You have, I think, a public that becomes numb. They're used to hearing this over and over, but this seems different. This is certainly more elevated.
This was an incredibly aggressive move by the Justice Department, Brianna, and look, we have seen more commonly investigations into leaks that related to seizing journalists' records that happened under Obama, that clearly happened very aggressively under former President Trump. The scope of this is really very different, and again, the bar is supposed to be higher for going after a co-equal branch of government's records, and so this speaks to, number one, just how much the Justice Department was doing things that Donald Trump wanted, and the former president was not shy, right? We heard him say it publicly over and over again about his desire to have leaks ended. He was constantly talking publicly about what he wanted the Justice Department to do in ways that would have helped him politically, at least certainly in this case. The Justice Department did things that were in tandem with what the former president wanted. And the other piece of this that we've not discussed are these gag orders that were put in place on Apple as the DOJ was trying to take this these cases for many years. It's only recently that was lifted. So who knows what else we will learn, but these are obviously very aggressive and unusual measures.
And Peter, the Times story, Maggie's colleagues in their digging said that the agents investigating at several different points thought they'd hit a dead end, and they had discussed closing these investigations. But at least in one instance, Bill Barr said no, keep digging. So does that lend credence to the idea that there's a political motivation here?
Absolutely it does. Look, the people investigating these cases, I know many of them. They're professionals, they have done this in the past, they know what they're doing. And a good investigator knows, having worked these sorts of cases, whether or not they're going to be able to make the case. And so when I hear non-political, objective career employees saying, we've got nothing here, only according to the New York Times have Attorney General Barr swoop in and say, no, keep digging, that gives me real concern about the true motivations behind some of these activities that continue, in my opinion, it looks like well past when they should have.
I want to play a soundbite actually from last year. This is from former President Trump when he was accusing Adam Schiff, the chair of the House Intel Committee, of leaking information.
And frankly, I think it's disgraceful. And I think it was leaks from the Intelligence Committee, House version, and I think that they leaked it. I think probably Schiff leaked it, but some people within that, Schiff leaked it, in my opinion. And he shouldn't be leaking things like that. They ought to stop the leaking from the Intelligence Committee. And if they don't stop it, I can't imagine that people are not going to go after them and find out what's happening.
They already had Maggie.
Right. I mean, as we know, the former president had a habit of saying things publicly as if he was unaware of what was taking place, and things were often taking place that matched his words and what he was saying. One thing I have been struck by in the last 12 hours or so since this came to light is the number of people who I have spoken to who worked inside the Trump administration who have essentially justified it and said, well, look, they too believed that there were reasons to be angry with the House Intelligence Committee. And they're losing sight because they get very stuck on sort of former President Trump's belief that he is a victim of some kind. They're missing the fact that DOJ was used in a pretty unprecedented way in this case on a sitting member of Congress, on several sitting members of Congress, on family members, in one case a minor. It's just incredibly unusual, and for people who are in the Trump administration, they have tended to lose sight of the fact that a lot of what the former president was doing was just beyond norms busting. It really walked up to or across the lines.
And as long as we're playing sound, as long as we're digging into the history file here, the Wayback Machine, I want to play part of the exchange. What year was it? 2019. This is between then Senator Kamala Harris and then Attorney General. We don't have it. Hang on. We're looking for this out. It's worth it. It's worth it. But Peter, to Maggie's point about what makes this unusual, explain to us, because as you said, you oversaw these investigations. What makes this different?
Well, there's always a tension between the government investigating leaks of information to the media and maintaining the protections of the First Amendment and a free press. And that's something historically that the FBI and DOJ have been very, very cautious and careful about how they investigated them and whether or not they were using intrusive methods to get to those investigations. And again, there are legitimate reasons to investigate leaks. The government needs to protect classified information and prosecute those people who disclose it. At the same time, to go after the sort of activity that we saw occurring, that's being reported on recently, the extraordinary breadth of it and how intrusive it was, really, in my opinion, tramples a lot of those established norms that the FBI has adhered to for decades and decades and decades. And it's going to take some real introspection within the department and the FBI to determine whether or not, and I think certainly it did go too far, and what needs to be done to do a realistic, reasonable level of investigative activity that still maintains the First Amendment protections of the media and a free press.
I think we should also talk about, and we'll play that sound from former Senator Kamala Harris, but we should also talk about what they were looking into. The leaks in this case had to do, the information, the reports that came out that led to this investigation was that the Russian ambassador to the U.S. had contact with top Trump aides, and what came out of those reports was hugely questionable, what they were discussing with the Russian ambassador. And yet, Peter, the reaction was to investigate where this came from. How did this very alarming information come out? That was not, that was the reaction, not, oh, obviously these aides should not be having these conversations.
Well, there's clearly a tension there. I mean, on the one hand, it was newsworthy. It was absolutely incredible what was going on by then the incoming National Security Advisor Mike Flynn in conversations with the Russian ambassador, trying to undermine the response to the Russian attacks in 2016 that the Obama administration was trying to implement. At the same time, we've got to separate these issues. The fact that that was absolutely improper, the fact that that was newsworthy, doesn't mean that people who are entrusted with classified information have the authority on their own to go out and disclose that information. So that
upload this one.